Hey YouTube, MaxZ2021 here, coming at you with another Thoughts on video. Haven't done one of those in a while. This time I'm going to be taking a look at a recent favorite of mine, and that is Komi-san Comyusho desu, or Komi-san Can't Communicate, or just Komi-san because that's easier to type, and that's what I'm going to be going with for the rest of the video when I'm referring to it. Mainly want to talk about what kind of manga it is, what the plot revolves around, things that I love about this series, things that I think people might not enjoy about it, and if I can, hopefully I can sum it up to where it's not super long, but I also want to go over my experience with this manga, like how I came about discovering it, and why I consider it an all-time favorite, and why I love it as much as I do. So, more on that last bit later. So, Komi-san is predominantly a comedy manga with some elements of romance added into the mix, though if I were to be more specific on that, the romance stuff doesn't really start showing up until after chapter 26, which is in volume 2. So, moving on, it is, to my knowledge, the second serialized work by Tomohito Oda. His first series, Dejikon, it hasn't been translated, or I haven't seen any raw scans online, so I've never had a chance to really check it out or read it, aside from whatever descriptions you can find for it online on, like, My Anime List or other manga-related websites. And I think it only lasted about 3 volumes, but after that he did the one-shot for Komi-san, and then it got picked up and was serialized in a weekly Shonen Sunday back in May of 2016, about 2 years ago. That's pretty neat. It is currently at, as of this recording, 143 chapters with 8 collected tankobon volumes, and the 9th volume comes out this month, I think on June 12th or June 14th, but yeah, more on that later, maybe. Well, there's not really much else to talk about regarding that. So, yeah, let's talk about the plot now. So, this manga, the plot goes a little something like this. The titular main character, Comyusho, this girl right here, she is adored and idolized by everybody at school. Everybody just thinks she's the greatest person to ever exist. They just really love her. And, yeah, the catch is, there's a catch to that. She has a communication disorder, hence the title, Komi-san Can't Communicate. And the other main character of this story, this guy right here, Tadano Hito, he figures out that she has a communication disorder, and after they have a bit of a discussion using a chalkboard in their classroom, as seen here, Komi brings up the fact that she has this goal / dream of making 100 friends. And Tadano takes it upon himself to help her out with achieving that, and thereby becomes her first friend. And that's pretty much how the plot kicks off in the first 6 chapters. So, before I go any further, I just want to mention that I'm going to leave some links in the description if anybody watching hasn't checked the description yet. Mainly just link to where I read the chapters at, where I buy the volumes at, since I have the first 3 volumes currently. There's volume 1, there's volume 2, and Volume 3. So, oh, I also have Volumes 4 through 6 coming in the mail. I think they'll show up about 2 weeks, since that's how long it took for these volumes to arrive when I ordered them. Anyways, yeah, I'll leave a few other links besides those. So if you want to, say for instance, check out the original post that I wrote on Facebook when I was talking about Komi-san, and basically just, I guess, paraphrasing what I wrote there, instead of watching the video and reading that instead, feel free to do that instead. I don't mind. So, yeah, back to the video. Things that I love about this manga. The chapter length. Chapters can be anywhere from 4 pages long to 18 pages long, though I do tend to see a bunch of chapters around the 10-page mark, so it doesn't take long to get through chapters, depending on how fast of a reader you are. The comedy and romance stuff. I personally feel that the comedy isn't forced for the most part, and the romance doesn't feel tacked on. And considering that the majority of the main cast are high schoolers, and that's a natural thing that can happen in real life, so I don't see any reason why it can't happen in this series. But, yeah, I should touch on the characters now. There's a few things I want to bring up about the characters. There's a few things I should bring up about the characters. And one of them ties into the comedy. Like, the way the comedy is delivered is mainly the way the characters interact with each other, and the way Komi reacts to different situations. I guess the same thing with the characters, but it's more so how she reacts than how the other characters react. Though that does play a part in the comedy, or the way it's delivered. But the main thing with the characters is that so far every named character, aside from like 2 who have references in their names, every character besides those 2, they have some kind of wordplay or a pun in their name that ties into that character's specific gimmick. Like, what makes them their own individual characters, I suppose. Like, for instance, Comyusho. Comyusho. That's the Japanese word for communication. Her thing is she can't communicate, hence the title. And another good example, Tadano Hito. That means, it literally means just some guy. Like, at the start of the series, he's literally just some guy. He's just your average run-of-the-mill teenager. But as the story goes on and stuff, he kind of breaks out of that mold, I guess. Though he is still rather average. And some characters poke fun at him for that. But, yeah, I think it's pretty neat how the characters have, like, some kind of thing involving their names. And, speaking of the characters, one thing that I do like about them, I think I might have mentioned it already, but I like the way that the characters interact with each other. And another thing about the characters is, let me just put that down. Another thing about the characters is, that ties in with the whole naming shtick thing. It's the way that they're portrayed as a character, like whatever their character type is. and that also ties into how they interact with each other. And I suppose it works for some of the characters, but the way he's drawn or did their designs, like that also plays into the comedy, and I think it's pretty neat. I also like the way that the art looks. I think Tomohito Oda is a pretty great artist. But one thing I want to touch on about the art is, now, this is how Komi normally looks. Or, no, this is how she actually looks. Good example I can give, like, chapter 1. Like, here's another example. Like, this is how she actually looks. And then, one way she's drawn... Let me take off the dust jacket real quick. She's usually drawn with this simplistic look to her that plays into, like, the comedy, like, how she's reacting to different situations. Oops, almost dropped the volume. Let me pull up my favorite one. Hold on, give me a second. Almost there. Here we go. This might look familiar to some people, but, yeah, she's usually drawn like this to help portray the way that the comedy is handled, and I think it works really well. And, yeah, I think that the way that the characters are portrayed by their character types also works really well. But, anyways, yeah, there's not really much else that I can think of. I mean, like, I found it really enjoyable. And I'll get back to this a bit later. But, I want to go over the things that I think people might not like about it. And despite the fact that I've read every chapter, at least every chapter up to 138, 3 times in a row, more on that later, I feel that the only negative, or the only things that I would consider a negative about this series would be the characters themselves. Either because of the way that they're portrayed, or just them being a specific character type. And the other big offender for that would be this one character who, during her introductory chapters in Volume 2, she does some stuff to Tadano, and when the incident gets resolved, it's more or less played for laughs, and it's just like brushed off, like it's not a big deal. And I feel that people might think that's in poor taste, considering that the character in question is a yandere. Let me pull up a panel with her in it. Give me a second. Yeah, this character right here, Yamai Ren. She's a yandere for Komi. And if it's not the stuff that she does during her introductory chapters, then it would be the way that she interacts with Komi, or I should say fawns over her. Like, again, it's played for laughs, but some people might not like the way that it's handled, and I could see why they might not like it, but, I mean, I thought it was funny. So, yeah. It's that. I mean, that stuff I just mentioned, and one thing I noticed after my second read-through, somebody mentioned something about how once a character's gimmick is used up, or he can't really think of a way to incorporate a character into a chapter, they kind of just get, like, written off or something like that. So there's chances that if you have a favorite character, they might not show up later on. But, excuse me. Aside from those things I just mentioned, there's not really much else that I would consider bad about this manga. And, yeah, now now with that out of the way, I'm gonna talk about how I came about this series and that other stuff I mentioned. So, here we go. Let's jump back to June 17th, 2017. So, on that day, I started reading The Promised Neverland, and I got caught up to it, and I got caught up after like 3 days. I think it was up to chapter 43 at the time. I got hyped up from this. I got 7 people hooked on it, and I really liked it. And then 10 days later, June 27th, 2017, one of my best friends, Sergio, he told me about Komi-san, and I read the one shot. I was like, okay, I'll go check this out. I read the one shot. I thought it was pretty nice. It's about like 60 pages, I think. And then 2 days later, June 29th, 2017, I read the first chapter. And then I forgot about it for almost half a year. And I'm pretty sure Sergio told me about it a few times between when I picked it up, when I started it and when I picked it back up. But it wasn't until around February or March where I remembered about it and I was like, hey, I should go read more of that. So I did. I read the rest of Volume 1. I was like, yeah, that's pretty nice. I read like 2 chapters from Volume 2. And then excuse me, I didn't read any more for a few weeks. And skip ahead to the middle of April. Now, anybody that watched the last haul video I did, I mentioned how I didn't really get to do any videos back in April because some boils developed on my lower back, and that left me bedridden for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And after like 2 or so days, I remembered about Komi-san again, and I was all, hey, you know what, I'm not doing much. I should go check this out. Or I should pick this back up. And I did, and 3 days later, I got caught up to chapter 138, and this was right before, or I think that chapter had just come out once I got caught up, and this was right before Golden Week. And anybody that doesn't know what Golden Week is, it's this week-long holiday in Japan where everybody gets off from like work and school, and no weekly manga magazines put out any new issues, so there's no new manga chapters during Golden Week. So anyways, I get caught up. Golden Week's about to start, and I wanted, let me just put this for display. I wanted to go back, reread the chapters, see if I could find any instances of characters showing up early or before they get properly introduced. Like, this one character named Onigashima Akako, she shows up in chapter 8, and then she gets named in chapter 19. And it's not until, like, I think chapter 122 that she gets her introduction. And while I was reading, I ended up analyzing stuff, and I started noticing things I didn't notice before, like subtle character development, and also when characters would show up in the background, and I thought that was pretty neat. And like 3 days later, I got caught up, but there wasn't a new chapter, and I needed my fix, so I went back, reread all the chapters and the one-shot for a third time, and at that point, I ended up overanalyzing the manga up to chapter 138, and during that initial read-through, when I was getting caught up, I was sending my friend that told me about it screenshots and commenting on them, and I remember one night, I even almost made his phone blow up for notifications while he was sleeping. Sorry about that, Sergio. But, yeah, um, yeah, like when I got caught up, that was the first time I ever went back and reread early chapters for an ongoing series. I never did that before with any manga I got caught up with as it was ongoing, with like maybe one exception. But yeah, I just enjoyed it so much that I wanted to reread it again for the reasons I mentioned. And yeah, I considered this an all-time favorite, or I would go so far to consider this a masterpiece, more so for the enjoyment factor that I personally had, rather than disregarding any flaws it has that I kind of touched on. And I put it up there with my other all-time favorite things. Like, for instance, I put it up there with One Piece, my all-time favorite manga, and Gunbuster, my all-time favorite anime, and all-time favorite thing. I'll do a video on this later in the year. But the only reason I don't have Komi-san as my all-time favorite manga, or the reason why it's my number 2 favorite manga, is more so for the nostalgia factor I have going for One Piece. That's literally the only reason. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I really enjoy this manga. I think Komi-san's best girl, one of the best girls to ever best girl, I might add. And yeah, I can't really think of much else to talk about. So don't forget to check the descriptions for like where to read it at. Maybe Viz will license this. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Hopefully. Yeah, bye.